I'll do a prayer of gratitude, and then a little recap of what is energy healing, and then a little recap of yesterday's talk, and then we'll dive into today's expansion and extension on the principles that we covered last time. Thanks for everyone for being with me. Thank you to being, for everything, for all the forms of energy that heal, for all the forms of consciousness which heal us, for all the forms which allow the flow of wisdom and knowledge to expand and to move. Thank you to the ancestors, also for being with us, for loving support. Thank you to the divine in every single person here who's here live in real time, and for everyone who will be live with us at other times when this recording goes live. May this webinar be blessed with efficiency and effectiveness and the unfolding of the most important and vital information pertinent to each person in this group, and all the healings that occur during our time together be the most important and the most supported and the most useful to everyone who's here. May they be oriented towards creating self-sufficiency and the ability to master the healing process for every one of us. Thank you, everyone, for being with me. All right. Thanks for being with me. Okay, so recap, what is energy healing? Energy healing is the process of focusing attention intelligently. It is a method of understanding both the way we focus attention and where we focus attention, because these are the two essential components to getting awareness or consciousness moved into the spots that require attention, and then the effect of consciousness in those areas is it's a bringing home. It brings the area, wherever the symptom is, wherever the part that hurts, it brings it home to wholeness. It brings it back. And I'm just feeling that happening already, starting for everybody. Even just talking about it has a nice effect, even for those who are not with us today. But of course, we'll be seeing this later. I have plenty of ways of describing the navigational paths by which we move consciousness around, and I will probably refer to those as we're going along. So rather than a big recap on that right now, we don't have to. But I would like to do a recap on yesterday's talk, and this is just from my memory. But of all the work that we did yesterday, I think one of the most important and significant areas that we touched on was a healing for, I'm just going to bring this closer, it was a healing for the third ventricle of the brain. Because that is where desire resides. There's a whole internal regulating system, but also an internal, I'm thinking it's like monitoring system that take all these little organs that are in there. Well, they've got, of course, I mentioned last night, hypothalamus, pituitary, and also arcuate nucleus, but there are a lot of others along with them. And then right in the base, like right behind the third ventricle, is that whole dopaminergic area that creates those flushes of dopamine, which make the being feel good. So we've got this regulating system, and then we've got the monitoring system, and then we've got the tie-in to the part of the nervous system that's responsible for allowing us to feel like life is worth living, blissful. So that was an important healing that took place. And then there was also a relationship between the healing that was taking place in the third ventricle and the heart. And as I recall, that heart healing also went back to several generations, many generations of ancestors. A lot of times the energy responsible for desire originates with the longing of the heart. And as came up yesterday in a question, a lot of times the longing of the heart, when it does manifest and the completion occurs, it may not physically manifest precisely as envisioned, but better that it manifests efficiently, more efficiently. Because the more efficiently a desire manifests, the more quickly one can integrate that experience and move on to the next step of the process. And the whole process is a process of unfoldment or expansion of consciousness. All right. So I know in an hour and a half, we talked about more stuff than an hour and 15 minutes, more stuff than that. But there was some discussion about I think I better touch on this too, on the causal level, the physiology, because I kind of outlined a little bit of a map of the source of creation being that point where all the manifestation of creation originates, and then up into the causal level of the physiology, which is like the finest manifest level of physiology, where karmas reside, potentials reside, realms of self reside, and the important point from yesterday that the realms hum, the realms vibrate and hum. And it's when the realms are vibrating or humming within themselves that the combination is ideal for manifestation. And that humming is a byproduct of awareness. How much of our awareness, this is very empowering. This is very empowering for everyone. I realize that that for a lot of people, the process, my brain is tying a bunch of stuff together, and I have to also make sure that our group is in its kind of coherent, checking in with the group to see how everybody's laying in. A lot of you just get in sync immediately, even without my awareness on it. Your awareness is sufficient. So God bless you all. But in order for me to give best expression to everyone's inner healing potential, it's also my awareness going in to enliven that space. And that's our healing space, the space of our healing circle. And I'm just feeling some bliss rising up in that. And it's been, I'll tell you, since from last night to today, there have been, I think the work that we did kind of stirred up some purification, which is always precious and always vital to the evolutionary process. But one of the points that was coming out yesterday was there are many cycles of the divine dialogue that go in and out. And we were in a larger kind of cycle that dissolves the old. So within that larger cycle of the dissolving of the old, we can create our little uplifts, right? Like that. We create our little uplifts as we're diving into a deeper level of being, but that overall dissolving is associated with the purification process. And it's not bad, it's good, but any holding on at that point will inhibit the process. So letting go, we're just looking into the collective and making sure that everybody's comfortable with letting go of the old, like the phoenix bird, right? It dissolves into the ashes of the flame and then it comes out new. We just want to make sure that the phoenix bird is ready to do that and going to feel comfortable doing that. And what we're doing is we're redefining in terms of much greater autonomy. This is what this webinar is about. It's a manifestation webinar. Much greater autonomy over the manifesting process. That means personal power. So today's talk ties the concept of individuality into the process of manifestation and the whole divine structure that allows the entire created universe to emerge. So I'm just holding that because that's the sun cult for today's session. I'm just feeling that. Okay. So I made a bunch of notes this morning because I wanted to make sure that there's some orderliness in the unfoldment of information. Okay. So we talked about how we're working with basically two elements at a very fine level of creation. Well begun is half done. So what we're looking at in this webinar and what I'm looking to do is activate healings to support your ability to work with the initial impulse of intention. Because, well, like I said, well begun is half done. So we've got two elements. We've got a kind of a space, we've got the boundaries or limitations within which we are manifesting. And then there is the resonation or the intention itself, which is that kind of lively quality that allows the space to express something specific. And I always think of musical instruments when I do this, probably because I used to teach music. And in musical instruments, what happens is there's something that vibrates, either a string or the lips or a reed or something is vibrating. And in and of itself, the vibration means nothing. That's not music. But if I go inside a nice big brassy horn, music comes out. So both things are, right? It's kind of magic how that happens. Music is the gift of the divine to our world. And so how I vibrate my lips is important, but the nature of that resonating space is also important. So with our awareness, we portion off aspects of creation within which we intend to manifest desire. And in the case of healing, of course, that portioning off is the physiology. In the case of, say, you want to manifest financial abundance, well, then the space that you portion off would be your financial status, your bank account, your method of gaining income, or the connection between the whole heart and the intention to serve, provide service and goods to the world, that area, and then from that area, how I provide for the creation comes out and embraces the field, which would be your financial structure. And so we've created a kind of we've created kind of a shape in which to create that manifesting form. Then the vibration is important. So the vibration itself, the vibration starts out as a fine impulse, and then it grows like a flower. And so ideally, if we want our intention to manifest, so it's useful to have a form like a template, which has the shape of what's known in the Vedas as a rick. It starts fine and then it expands and expands and expands like that. And it reminds me very much of like the end of a trumpet or something. So this form I'm offering because I discovered it about a week and a half ago. Oh, and boy, did that create some purification. Woo-hoo. Anyway, but there's a form at the fine level of creation. It's comprised of consciousness. It's made of awareness. And it's so simple, it's capable of sitting down at that causal level of the physiology and say what you would like to manifest is financial abundance. Then you use your shape, right? You use the space, the sacred space of your financial status and structure and relationship to the rest of the world. Or you want to manifest ideal opulent health. Then you use the shape, which is the body, right? And then the field all the way out to the astral level of the physiology, which is that's about as far as individual self. And after astral body, we become more collective. So health. And then within that boundary that you've sort of portioned off with consciousness, we place this form that expands. The first time I found this form was about 12 years ago, maybe between 12 and 15 years ago. And I was a very unhealthy girl at the time. I felt like I was about to die, and my health had been deteriorating. And I came to this point where I was getting intuitive signals that I had about 2 weeks to live. It felt like that, maybe 2 weeks. And part of me didn't care at all. Part of me was like, fine, I am so uncomfortable. I am so miserable. I am in so much pain. Just, if that's what's going to happen, bring it. But then I also have my children on the other side, like, no, 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 no. And so at one point, I was in a deep meditative state, and I heard intuitively this voice: if you have a choice, what do you choose? Do you choose to leave, or do you choose to stay? And I said, well, if I have a choice, I will stay. And I knew at that moment that the choice to stay was the harder choice, that the leaving would have been easier, but I went ahead and accepted to choose to stay. And immediately the form appeared, this form that allows for the shape shifting of energy frequencies of consciousness. And it appeared deep, deep, deep within my awareness. And what happened was that feeling of okay, then if I'm going to stay, it's going to be in a healthy, robust manner. It started out little, and it unfurled through the shape of this end of a trumpet form, like a cornucopia form. And once that seed was placed in that form, I couldn't really, it wasn't worth taking out at that point. You can do anything. Consciousness is a field of all possibilities. You can mess with it, but it just makes a mess. At that point, I just let it do what it needed to do. And when I came out of that meditation, I was a different girl, and I just knew I was going to live. I knew I was going to live. And at that point there, I still had a bit of a rough row to hoe, right? But it was done. And that form is an archetypal template. And as we talked about yesterday, and opened for everyone, and I think we've done this in previous webinars too, opened the connections between the senses of perception. That was part of yesterday too, was some healing for senses of perception, and the locations in the ocean of consciousness where all the templates reside and where the blueprints reside. And there's an area that I think of as being specific for Stapatya Ved, because it's the area where all the principles of structuring reside. And these spaces, these cosmic spaces, have their unique energy signatures. We talked about that yesterday too. Energy frequencies or signatures. So they can be located based on the energy frequency. They have a feel. They have a feel. So I think this is a nice moment. I just want to double check through everybody's senses of perception and senses of fine perception, and make sure that everyone in the webinar has a clear channel or access to these realms of creation where structuring principles, templates, and blueprints reside. It's a vast, vast area. I need your help with this, because I, as a single person, cannot in one lifetime go to those places and discover everything that's there to discover. I simply can't. It's just simply too much information. So we have to do it together. As a team, we can split up, right? And we can each go in and find the bits and pieces of the puzzle and come together in our webinar and put our pieces together, and then we all get to enjoy the bigger picture. So thank you all for doing this with me. This is so important. It's so blessed. It's like Tomb Raiders or something. Because sometimes you go in, and there's also it requires rebooting or a restructuring of the belief system in order to work at this level, which brings me to some of the notes that I was making this morning, which I was really, really having fun with this. We talked a lot about the astral body and belief systems yesterday because the structure of the astral body and the organization of belief systems are essential for the ability to navigate the field of consciousness effectively and to gain access to those aspects at the causal level of the physiology that are responsible for allowing intention to manifest. So there was a big healing for the astral body, and as I was making notes, I was thinking, gee, we need to do even more healings for the astral body. One of the points up here, here's this point, and this kind of brings me into the area that I wanted to expand into this morning, that fulfilling desires means an interface between individual intention and the condition of the collective, because always our desires are fulfilled in the context of the greater fulfillment of everybody in creation, right? So it's like, you know, you can have a desire, but if the desire is directly opposed to, say, the well-being of another person, then you will be lucky if nature stops your desire in its tracks, because the last thing we want to do is hurt somebody else. So, or hurt anybody. Or maybe that's not the last thing, I'm not sure. This would be one of the moments my son would be here disagreeing with me. But anyway, however, the point is that we're always having our desires in the context of the greater whole. That's just the way it is. And with the support of the greater whole, and this came up as one of the points from yesterday from, I think, an anonymous person, was that you have to gain direct access to the mother of creation, to the source of creation, to the fundamental divinity of life, because that's what's actually making everything happen. And that is absolutely correct. So the point is that our individual intention has to interface with that collective. So, and getting back to my point, yes, so that connection or correlation happens at the astral level. So what that means is that in the field of all being, pure resource resides. And at the causal level of creation, this big collective level of our beings, of our finest relative expression, what happens at the causal level is kind of a little bit like on automatic in a way, like all the laws of nature are there, all the fine forms of creation, all intelligences responsible, all the realms are there. And that's kind of like nature. Like nature's going along and doing its thing anyway. Whether you're in human form or whether you're in Davic form or wherever you are or whatever you're doing, nature's going to kind of be doing its manifesting the creation thing. So, you know, I could have imagined this to be red or something, but you know, it came out this way because I didn't really put a lot of attention into it. If I put a little more attention, I could probably be holding up a red pen. But this manifested for me just because that's happening anyway. However, the level where we start to really interface with it is at the astral level, because that's where we have our belief systems, and our belief systems are like a filtration system that only bring up those specific features of this finer, kind of more unbounded level of creation that our being feels is important. So it prioritizes, it helps us prioritize. And it also limits. And I'm double checking for everyone who's new today here, who wasn't yesterday, because one of the healings yesterday was an organization of the belief systems, the entire astral body and all the level of belief that resides at that level, and centered at the heart area, so that all the beliefs that have sort of pairs of opposites still can work together conjointly. What occurred to me this morning when I was making notes was that, I'm looking at my notes here a little bit, was that expansion and integration of the belief system is essential for greater and greater individual autonomy over the manifesting process. The way the whole system is set up is designed in such a way as to really empower us as individuals. I mean, we seem like a little tinier than the tiniest fleck of nothing in the universe, in a great big universe, and little tiny people, you know, so we seem like we're, say, kind of very small, and we can be kind of thought of as very insignificant or something. And I know that for generations upon generations, people have thought of themselves as very small and very insignificant. And that's been part of the belief system. I'm small and I'm insignificant. But the way the whole thing is structured to support our ability to realize or recognize actually the greatness of the human instrument, the human consciousness, the human expression of divinity, divinity expressed as human, and just how amazingly incredible, powerful, fully divine that is. So the way it works is we have autonomy ultimately over the way we set up our belief systems. Oh, some people don't believe that. So that belief, I don't have autonomy over the way I set up my belief system, is old stuff. It goes back to childhood. A lot of people, when they're really little, they go through experiences of feeling like they don't have much autonomy and they don't have say. And the big, powerful grown-ups are calling all the shots and they're making all the rules. And I, as a little person, I simply have to accept. And oh, guess what? The rules are kind of failing. Oh, look, my parents aren't even happy and healthy. You know, so I'm looking back at little self, all of our little selves. I saw this early this morning when I was looking into today's webinar, and I didn't think it would come forward because I thought to myself, well, the condition of little self, anything of the past, is a lesser state of evolution. So, you know, maybe we just don't even need to go there, but it looks like we need to go there, you guys. So let's just do this. Going into little self, like little 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old self, at that point, the soul, it takes the soul years to integrate into the physiology. Some kids go faster than others. I have 3, so I watch them integrate to their physical bodies at different speeds. But there's this process where the soul gets used to being confined within the constraints of a little tiny physiology. And during that time, a lot of the experience isn't being constrained. A lot of the experience is, I'm just a field of life force. Lots of little kids, they're running around, man, and that's what they are. They just know themselves to be a field of intelligence and creativity interfacing with the world. And the boundaries and limitations of they stand up on a chair and they're like, I am so tall, you know. They're really not so tall, but they feel it because they can just make it. They can create that. They can create the experience of being 6 feet tall, even though they're not. And that's the experience. I'm 6 feet tall. So that experience of self, of being not like really highly identified with the physiology, what happens, there's this kind of breaking down process that occurs where the person gets more and more and more enmeshed in their physiology. And it's absolutely necessary in order to do things like master a sport or a musical instrument or even develop good social behavior and that sort of thing. We have to become more constrained within the physiology. But now, with fully ripened nervous systems, is a great time to reestablish that sense of self, that identification of self as I am a force of nature, I am a force of consciousness. So that belief gets kind of like beaten out of kids a little bit when they're little. You know, you have to sit down. You have to wear clothes. You have to eat this now. You have to go with me now because this is where we're going, you know. And they're like, I'm unbounded. Anyway, so yeah, just bringing that in. Bringing in the sense of self as a force of nature, force of energy, into the points in the history of the lifespan where they were it was sort of beaten out, so to say. And it's not I think maybe the word beaten is wrong because it's not a terrible thing. It's part of the evolutionary process. right? The road to full adulthood kind of swings like that, you know? So it's an important part of the evolutionary process. I'm getting this insight. So, okay, divine being says, okay, I'm going to take a human form. So it starts out the human form as a little tiny person. And divine being feels like, I am a force of divine being in a little tiny person's body. And then that essential core piece, that piece that's like, I am divine being, that piece in the course of a lifetime, its job is to evolve. Like that's the part of divinity that evolves with it. Like that's what humans do. We expand, consciousness expands as a byproduct of our entire setup. So what it has to do in order for divinity to evolve, it has to completely break down its association in that being, in that person, in their life, in their physiology, and who they think they are, only to be rebuilt anew, like the phoenix coming out of the ashes, only to be rebuilt at a much, much higher level. It comes from, so what do we do? In between the death of the phoenix, the burning it up in its fire and its rebirth, what we do is we set up a belief system, right? That's what you do at that time of your life. You set up your filtration system so that when the divine being comes back in, it comes in within specific constraints and limitations that allow being to understand itself within a greater context, in more detail, with more appreciation, with more understanding of self, of what that really means, being embodied as human. Beautiful. That's beautiful. You are beautiful. You are so beautiful. Because I wouldn't have seen that. I wouldn't have seen that, you guys, if it weren't for you guys. I love what we do. This is the power of this group, as it brings this information out. Okay, so we start building the belief system when we're little people. Then when we get to be older, we might find that, well, a lot of my belief system I inherited from my predecessors. And so maybe there are bits and pieces of it that didn't work. You know, we have the advantage of little people. We look to the predecessor and say, well, how are they doing now? You know, are they okay? Are they, you know, were they successful, right? So where were they successful and where were they less successful? And how can I restructure my belief system when I'm little so that I can perpetuate and bring forward to the future that about them which was successful, and maybe let fall away the parts that weren't successful. So that's something that cultures or refines over generations and generations. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have to read this comment from Croatia. This lady says, my 6-year-old son says, I'm not afraid of anything. He also said that he has a heart, and in his heart is love, and he can love everyone. Oh, that's unbounded thinking, unbounded thinking. We were just talking last night after the webinar how a few years ago, even 10 years ago, students in school would be punished for sleeping in class, right? Oh, how many people would get punished for sleeping in class, right? Like anybody, like that's rude. You sleep in class. It's completely changed. My son came home and said something to me about it. And then last night, another student was here. He said the exact same words. And now it just spread like wildfire. Everyone knows that you understand information more quickly, you process it and integrate it more quickly when you're in sleep state than when you're in wake state. How about that? So now I don't know if this is filtered all the way to the high school. I have a daughter who's, you know, teenager, and I think she would still probably get in trouble for sleeping in class. But at the college level, this comprehension is coming into our collective. And it came from 2 different people in 2 different places, and I know that they didn't talk to each other about it. But the teachers are having the experience that the person looks like they're sleeping, and if they say, hey, you know, tell me the answer to this question, they open their eyes and they have the answer, like not just fully developed, but fully integrated as well. So this is an example of a change that can occur over generations, where you know, something was a little bit like there was a lack of appreciation for the ability of the human nervous system to process information in sleep and dream state. Like how many people just think of that as, well, that's just unconscious, subconscious stuff, like I don't go there, right? But now the awakening of consciousness, and all of a sudden students are going, well, you know, this class is getting a little difficult. I'm going to like go into sleep state so I can process the information faster. And then come out with better grades. Success, it works. What do you know? So this is the idea, is that we're looking at ways of like restructuring the way we think about our reality so that we can do more. Let's see. So I was thinking from here, I only made one little word note. Oh, I was thinking for expansion and integration of the belief system at the astral level of the physiology, to embrace and incorporate a deep understanding of the mechanics of how the spaces resonate. Because that seed area is so essential to understand in order to manifest, really make a turnaround, like I did in that meditation so many years ago. I mean, literally, I was dying. And I was just one hospital visit after another. It was such a mess. It was such a mess. And then in one meditation, in one little part of one little meditation, the whole thing, it just took a 180-degree turn, man. The phoenix rose from the ashes. And so, now we come down to kind of a hair-splitting spot where this comes out of this conversation that Matthew and I were having. This is my son. We have these conversations. He was saying that thought and feeling are complex. And I said, well, you know, some thoughts and feelings are less complex than others, right? Like you could have something that's just awareness of experience. Like, I know I'm breathing. Like that's a really simple thought compared to like a really complex thought, like some calculus, you know, some trigonometry calculation or something like that, trying to, you know, measure the weight of a proton or something. You know, that takes all kinds of mental gymnastics, but they're simple thoughts and they're more complex thoughts. So I said that would allow for finer expressions of intelligence to be sentient and to have thought, because the simpler forms, like he's saying, well, you can't say that a proton has a thought. And I'm like, well, you know, maybe it doesn't have a human thought, but it has some kind of level of experience. And he insisted it doesn't. And darn that guy, his logic is just, oh, I cannot get past his logic. I cannot. It just hurts. I can't get past it. So his point is that thoughts are comprised of smaller structures, smaller impulses of intelligence. And if you have a physical structure, like say a proton, or say a quantum particle, say a quark or something, you've got some really gravitino, you've got a little gravitino down there. That gravitino is so small that its very existence is smaller than the components of a thought. If the gravitino is so small that it's actually smaller in portion than the component of a thought, I said, but the gravitino knows it exists. It at least has the experience of existence. And the point here is that, I'm sorry, I can't agree with him. It has the experience of existence. And you know, you can divide the components of thoughts to so small, but eventually you can still divide them to ever smaller and ever smaller, all the way down to the unified field. So it's going to divide down. That's just the way it is. However, the idea that thoughts and intentions are comprised of components, subtle components, this is significant because the components are founded upon the belief system. The belief system allows you access to specific components and it filters out others. So that's why I was using this example down here. Right. So when consciousness moves in to various spaces, it activates the space. But consciousness won't move into spaces that you don't know about. Your consciousness, your awareness won't go somewhere if you don't know that thing exists. That's why we did the download earlier, for you to have access to all the spaces, all the places where the archives of the templates and the blueprints and the, you know, the structuring principles of creation. There are other templates as well. There are other, archives of information as well, other spaces. But I wanted to bring in the principle that those spaces, because we're talking about the causal level of creation, right, where everything's going on automatically, they function kind of like they're sort of in a semi-sleeping mode. They're not like fully activated until our awareness comes into the space. This is very, very important, believe it or not, for people with eating disorders. It is. Why is it important for people with eating disorders? Because eating disorders that involve not enough food in the body have to do with the desire for control. And also eating disorders that involve too much food in the body have to do with the desire to control and comfort and nurture. And the reality is that the power of a human is to be able to put awareness into those spaces and wake them up. And that power is so profound. It is so far past any of the challenges that appear on the surface of, oh, wow, I don't know how to handle this situation. It's so far past that. We go into the space, our awareness wakes it up, and it enhances the hum. There's already a hum naturally occurring in all the spaces. But when we go into those spaces, we perceive, and right now everybody's sense of perception going into the fine senses to open up and activate the ability to perceive what the natural state of hum is in the sacred spaces of the causal body. Remember the activation we did for the heart? The heart feels it. The heart feels it. Now, this is a great time to bring in a point that was brought up earlier today, before the webinar. And I just hope, because has Dorothy integrated it fully? I'm not sure. So we'll just see how well this one comes out. But bear with me, everyone, because it's a really important point. Yesterday, we talked about the tanmatras, which are the subtle essence of senses of perception. So we have the 5 elements, right? Space, water, fire, air, and, earth, water, fire, air, and space. And then we have senses of perception associated with those. And then deeper than that, the essence of perception are the tanmatras. And of the tanmatras, rupa, which is the one associated with eyesight, which means form. Rupa means form. Rasa means taste, right? So we have different subtle essences of perception that rupa, form, is associated with fire, and that, so it's integrative.
Bear.
It's a bear?
No, air.
It's air. Oh, thank you. Right. I knew there was something wrong with what I was saying. It's air, right, because air is sense of touch, and all the skin is our organ of touch. Thank you. Thank you. I actually knew that, but thank you. I need to be straight now. Yeah, and sense of touch, as I think I've mentioned on previous webinars, is connected to the word for feeling in every language on earth means both sense of touch and emotional feeling. That's a universal, that's a human universal. So thank you, my father, who is a linguist. is my reference for that. Yeah, so the heart is the feeling center of the physiology, and it's like, in a sense, energetically the glue that holds together the whole energetic structure of the physiology as well. So this going into this tanmatra for sense of touch, air, rupa, rupa. Oh, Svarsha's touch. Yeah, that's what confused me, because I had just read the other one in the book. Thanks. It's okay, guys. We can still work with the fine structures of the essence of the senses. The important thing is that we get down and look at them and understand them from the level of how they feel in the field of consciousness. We can do this. All this is showing is that this is an area that needs to peel open, and we need to get in and understand it better. Yeah, because Rasa's taste. Rupa would be sight, right? Yeah, Rupa's sight. That's what I thought. So in the heart, I'm feeling a pulse. And it's going about this fast. And it's just, what it's doing is it's pumping out the heart's truth. And this heart's truth is showing its alignment to the field of the web of life. And in the web of life, there are all these nodes, big nodes, little nodes. They're big nodes with little nodes inside them. Think of the flower of life matrix or the different forms of sacred geometry. And so you've got a big flower of life form, like say, around a big tree or something like that. But then within that flower of life, there are little nodes. And each node is like, it's like humming or vibrating with its specific resonation of energy. And each, within the smaller and smaller and smaller the nodes become, the more defined they become. Like the really big, like there's like a great form that goes around the whole universe, and it's just everything. So it's very abstract and it's not very highly defined. But in the very tiny, tinier nodes, you get these little pairs of opposites. And then at the quantum level, you get these lovely little pairs of opposites, right? They come out of the absolute and then they go back together like that. And they're just little complements that come and go with each other, and they're very specified. So the spaces that we work with, oh, see, here comes a new download. Thank you. It's good that we found, we're like, oh, wow, we're not quite getting something here. What do we need? Open it up. So the spaces that are more specified, like say, my financial status, or my health, or the health of my kidneys, or the health of my immune system or something, these are like, they're smaller spaces because they're very highly specified. So we're working within a range or a realm of larger and smaller spaces. And if, say, some aspect of health, say, I think I'd like to use joints, because this was a question that came in yesterday, was the idea of joint health. Joints are the places where the complementary pairs of opposites come together, right? Everywhere there's a joint in the body, the dynamics of the interface between the complementary pairs of opposites resides. And so every time we move a joint, we are exploring that relationship between the complementary pairs. So that means a lot of letting go. Movement in the joints. You can't hold on. In the joints, it's like, the flexibility is the name, as like the predominating influence there. Flexibility and stability, right? They have to be both the complementary pair. Okay, so say I want joint health. And I have to look at the field of the joints and the physiology and all the connective tissue, and we can go into the physical material, but if we go more into the energy level of the joints and the physiology, what we see is we come down to what we're doing is we're looking at the space in the context of its larger reality, right? Because I can look at my joint and say, oh, you know, if there's something there, you know, there's something not happy or something. That's looking at it in a small context. And if I try to deal with it, I'm dealing with a very, very small, limited space, very specified. That means the chances of what I do in that space are less likely to coordinate with the larger evolution of creation and less likely to get support from the larger level of creation. So what we do is we look at that area, the joint, for example. Let's do this one, it bends better. And we're saying, well, this is where the coordination between the complementary pairs comes together. And if I look at that, I look at the creation, the web of life, where all the nodes of creation are sitting with their complementary pairs and they're interacting like this in every node of creation, every one, then all of a sudden what's happening here is illuminated by a balanced vision of the collective potential of every one of those nodes, every one of those relationships. And that does several things. One, it gives me a download of what the ideal relationship should be in that joint. Two, it opens the door for supportive nature from that whole field of the web of life to come in and help the transformation, because the blueprint is there in the field. So now the blueprint has dawned in the awareness and can go with attention wherever the joint is. I know I've got someone with a knee problem going on here. The attention can go in there, and the attention carries with it the blueprint for the ideal or optimal condition of that joint. And as the awareness filters through the system, it also communicates through that universal language of feeling. And this is where the tanmatras come in, I guess, because this element of feeling, so basic to the communication between individual and all those little joints, we'll call them little joints or nodes out in the field of life. So the flow of love starts to move between the individual and the web of life. And as that happens, the web of life starts returning the love in the form of the ideal structure of that joint. And then through the heart's interpretation of that love, because that is love coming directly from the environment, that goes to the knee or the finger or wherever the need is. And you can use your hand chakras as needed to support that focusing of attention. And then the blueprint actually moves into the knee. And then you've got the juxtaposition of two things. You've got the knee in its unhappy state, and you've got the knee in the blueprint, the ideal blueprint. So now we have these two values, and then they become like two sides of a joint. They come together and to find a common balance. And that's what I was going to say at the beginning of this is I feel that the balance between stability and flexibility is probably the most important energy medicine that we can give to the joints, any joints, stability and flexibility, strength and flexibility. I'm seeing fear leaving the joints. I think it happens because there's a long pattern, an old ancestral pattern for being worried when transitions occur. And for looking at the dissolving side of the divine dialogue, because anytime there's a transition, the old dissolves, the new emerges. So looking at that dissolving side and having beliefs that identify that side of the process as bad or not as good as the building up side or something. No, the dissolving side is part of creating a foundation. Because what happens when we dissolve the old is the whole system comes back to the foundation of everything in creation, which is the source of being, right? That's the foundation. So when the dissolving is happening, it's not that something valuable is being destroyed, it's that what's there is being brought to the home of absolute stability, and then whatever of it can't survive at that home of absolute stability, whatever of that original form can't make it past the door into heaven, if you will, into the field of absolute being, then that falls away along the way. Whatever is left that's capable of maintaining in the light of totality, absolute being, that forms the seed for the upswing, for the re-emergence of consciousness. And this is really important for everyone, Every time we go through a cycle like that, it always involves a redefinition of self, exclusively, without exception. Anytime, some healing in the knee or some healing in the immune system, or I get over my cold or anything, it going through that cycle is a metaphor for redefining individuality in terms of divine expression, because that's taking the individual healing out to the big level. So we've got spaces within spaces within spaces, right? And so what we do is, anytime a symptom is there, it's a gift, because it gives us a space to begin with. And as is the macrocosm, so is the microcosm. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm, to get those in order. And so we get a microcosm with a symptom. A microcosm is presented or offered. So it's not bad. It was like earlier when I was like, oh, I'm confused about Rupa. Well, it's not bad. It just provides us with a microcosm to begin with, showing that, oh, there's potential for something really amazing to come out here. So I see a question has come in. Hello. Can you talk more about the health of the pineal gland and how that impacts the release of belief systems and opening our higher consciousness? Ooh, cool question. Okay, thanks for this good question. So as we know, the pineal gland is the seat of the Ajna chakra, and it's right at the back of that third ventricle of the brain that we've been working with. And the role of the pineal gland is to act as a switching device between states of consciousness. So between waking to dreaming, dreaming to sleeping, sleeping to dreaming, sleeping to waking, like that. It completes the loop. And it functions in the gap, we could say, between them. So one of the great functions of the pineal gland is that it supports individual access to the field of transcendental consciousness, which is the state of awareness that we go through when we're switching, right? So if you go from waking to dreaming, I know I've mentioned this before, we have to go through transcendental, but this is for the new people. We have to go through transcendental consciousness, like putting the car in neutral, right? So you go from first gear to second to third, you've got to go through neutral. So the pineal gland is able to make this transition between any particular mode or function of the physiology and that state of pure, unbounded, infinite silence. Now, yes, this brings up a really interesting point regarding belief systems. The thing about restructuring the belief system is that anytime we structure anything new, or even have an intention to create something from nothing, or to create something new, or remodel something, anything like that, remodel our belief system, for example, the intention, when it first emerges from the state of non-existence into existence, sets the entire evolving system back to zero. Kind of like the Mayan calendar, it's like, oh, now it goes all back to zero again, like all those cycles, like astrology, right? That all the different planets have all their different cycles that are playing out, but every once in a while they all come into alignment, and it's like, oh, we're back to zero again. And then they go off into their patterns of interfacing with each other in different waves. And so the pineal gland has this ability to give them, to provide the ability to go into the zero state. And that's like creating a fresh start. So being, the belief system gets a chance to, if we're looking at the belief system itself and we say, okay, I have this belief system that hasn't been taking into account all this structure of my causal body, all this massive, massive potential that I have at my fingertips to restructure myself, to restructure my world, to restructure everything. So I need to rebuild the belief system so that I am accounting for this. Embracing the definition of self to include, I should say, redefining the self to embrace the awareness of the nature of the causal body. It's like a gardener. If you have, I want to bring up this example anyway, that a gardener knows that if they accept that there are certain intelligences in certain parts of the earth, that when they're in the garden working with the plants and the stones and the minerals and the water, if they are willing to appeal to those aspects of that land, if they are willing to honor the life force in the land, then you end up with magical fairy gardens like Findhorn. You end up with people who can grow carrots this big out of sand and cabbages that big and that sort of thing. You know, this is what happens when the individual intention is able to open up and align with the web of life in all the different manifesting that's taking place in all the different nodes. They each have their own hum, and they each have their own way of expression, and then they're parts of bigger nodes, which are parts of bigger nodes. And so if we take our individual intention and we get it lined up, we're aware, yes, I have a causal body, and yes, from my causal body, I can access the energy signature of all those nodes. I can actually interpret through my heart the energy signature, or what is happening in the web of life. What is happening? What is happening? What is happening? Oh, so much is happening. As I said, we're in a big cycle right now that's kind of falling down like that. A lot of deaths, right? Big cycle of falling down. So in order to have the courage to open up senses of perception and look at the big cycles and at the big nodes and see everything that's happening, we have to let go of the belief that it's bad when things break down. It's not bad. It's providing the opportunity to open up another piece of the puzzle. Having to clear a lot of fear for a few people. In the whole, like in the gut area, in the stomach area, third chakra, and then down into the Basti Mahamarma area. That's ancestral. Ancestral clearing for because there's just a lot of recoiling and fear and you know, along with that, when the recoiling and the fear and all the belief systems get set in of, oh yeah, if it's the dissolving side of the system, that's bad, then what happens is that's what's manifested. And all of a sudden people are having experiences and getting impressions that support that idea that it's bad. No, it's not bad. It's like amazing. It's amazing what this universe does. And it's completely designed to empower the individual to accomplish this life purpose. And that is to come in as divinity in a human form and know it, and then to lose that knowledge, and then to rebuild oneself as with various capabilities and understandings and their own specifically constructed belief system personality, and then rediscover your divinity at a level which is far expanded from the original concept of self with which one arrived in this world. That's the purpose. That's the purpose. It's to empower you. It is to empower you. I'm talking to my aunt. Okay. She's probably got 24 hours to go, and then she's going to not be here anymore. So it's good to know your life purpose before you leave, right? It's important. Okay, here's a question. This question comes from a very wise healer. I'm being torn apart between expansion and maintaining the old system. The harder I work, the farther behind I get. Oh, that's a belief set. That's a little old belief, isn't it? Boy, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, or something, right? So the harder I work, the further I get behind. It's like driving me nuts. I see the joint explanation just given fits as metaphor. I see the joint explanation just given fits as metaphor. Can you do a healing to let go so the new balance can occur? Yes. Let's do it. Thank you. Thank you for expressing that. So the problem is, listen to these words. I'm being torn apart like a joint, right? Like a joint that hurts or isn't working right. It's being torn apart, tearing the meniscus or tearing the cartilage. Ow. Being torn apart between expansion and maintaining the old system. Right. So we did talk about this a little bit yesterday, and it was something that's been on my mind last couple of days, which is that it's a human characteristic. And I see it played out in the birthing process very dramatically. Giving birth is painful, but nature is kind. And so even though giving birth is painful, nature lovingly allows a woman to forget the pain, like almost instantly. It's amazing. It's amazing how much giving birth can hurt and how much you don't feel, as soon as it's done, it's like, wow, that wasn't so bad. You know, it's just amazing how that works. And so like right in there, right even at the time, and baby also, because it's hard to be born. Being born is painful. Giving birth is painful. Being born is painful. There's a lot of pressure on the body and pressure on the head and all kinds of things happen and all that. So, and yet, once the process is done, there's this like, well, that wasn't so bad, right? So we do this all the time with the past, and we kind of do it with the future a little bit too. We look back at the past and like, oh, we kind of like romanticize the past, right? Oh, the good old days. I was doing so well when I was in high school, you know? Oh gosh, sometimes I look back at high school, it's like, oh, I was, oh, well, maybe a little bit in certain ways. But we tend to romanticize. We tend to look back and like just sort of highlight the parts that were cheery, you know, sometimes. And so there's a tendency to think, well, the old system is great. But the thing is, no part of any system ever is static. If it's static, it's stopped evolving. And if it stops evolving, that's when pain really comes in. So it's not about if the intention, if like my life goal or my intention is sort of oriented towards maintaining the old system, then that's necessarily going to break down and not lead to maximum success, right? Because one thing guaranteed about the whole universe is it's constantly changing. So change is inevitable, but it's how do we ride the waves of change? And I really appreciate this question because I feel like it's a great summary question for today's session and last night's session too, is that, you know, the whole process of manifestation is not about necessarily taking a static system and creating something from it. It's leveraging the change which is already occurring in such a way as to promote maximum evolutionary transformation. So the dichotomy between expansion versus maintaining the old system, to be said in favor of maintaining the old system, is whatever is present in the old system that can survive the fire of going into the field of pure being, that will maintain no matter what we do. If it can survive that, it can survive anything. So that part of the system is the rock. It is your foundation. It is the basis upon which the new expansion occurs. She says, the harder I work, the farther behind I get. So that's like a little, I'm just breaking the question down. So I address each part of it. That's a little thought pattern. And boy, we're familiar with it. Anybody, maybe not the youngest generation so familiar, but sure enough, the older generations is like, oh, all my life I heard that one, you know? So that's it's like a little belief system that's managed to maintain over many generations. We know the previous generation and the generation before that and the generation before that, they were all saying that little combination of words to each other, to themselves. And so it speaks from here, or it types from here. But it's also the seat of speech is really the feeling in the heart. And then it comes up and it becomes a thought. And when it becomes a thought, the harder I work, the farther behind I get. Then that becomes a form, a subtle form that moves into the astral body, and it becomes part of the filter. Then in the filter, it only lets information in that fits that piece, that little filter. The harder I work, the farther behind I get. And then that's all that's being let in now. Okay, because it's part of my structure. So what we want to do is we want to take that, not just for you, but God bless you and thank you for bringing it, but we want to go back as many generations as we need to go back. Oh, she's saying, I have 3 projects, each of which is all-consuming, and I'm unable to let any one of them go. I get it. Anyway, in order to support your ability to do a couple of things, first of all, we're clearing up and doing some organizing in the filtration system. That will help you prioritize these projects. That will help you see them in the light of a larger context. So you'll know, maybe you don't have to let them all go, but maybe you have to work on them one at a time, or, you know, maybe there are ways of delegating or something. There are ways. It's never, double bind is another one of those beliefs that you got it, but you can't. That's another one of those beliefs that's been, look, there are lots of head noddings over here, because you got it, but you can't, manifested, I would say it manifested to a pinnacle during the Second World War. People felt so trapped. The Jews felt so trapped. It was impossible. It was an impossible situation. That kind of impossible, that's also a belief. And it goes back, it goes back, it goes back. That one goes way back. That impossible goes tens of thousands of years. Tens of thousands of years. Can't even count the number of generations. So we're clearing this. The harder I work, the farther behind I get. And I gotta, but I can't. These beliefs have resonant relationship with the condition of the heart area. There's like a feel in the heart, that kind of constricted, like, feeling when you got it, but you can't. That feeling is there in the heart area. It's clearing. It has to clear all the way up into the throat and up into the head area where we speak it and we think it. The fact that we have for generations created word patterns that give expression to those very limiting beliefs is indication that they have become entrenched in collective thinking. So we're working with not just going back through time and helping our ancestors, our personal ancestors, but we're also working on moving it out of the collective consciousness too, so that you can live in a world that's not also holding that. If my beliefs are in my astral body, then my astral body comes in contact with other people's astral bodies. And when there are conflicting beliefs from one to the other, that makes it harder for me to support and sustain my beliefs. So right there. And I'm seeing that underneath it in the feeling, I'm going right down to the seed of it, okay? So we've got the words are one thing, but the seed of the belief is a feeling of unworthy and not good enough. That's the seed. Yeah, I got it, but I can't, because as I am, because of the color of my skin or because of my family connections or because of whatever, I'm not good enough. Or just because I'm human, I'm not good enough. And that feeling of because I'm human, not good enough, goes back to that healing that we did for the early childhood, where we had to lose our association or our recognition of our own divinity in order to make it through the early part of our evolutionary process. It's right there. That's where the I'm not good enough is sitting. So we're doing the healing. We did the healing for that part already. We need to go back maybe and watch that part of the video again. Note Note to my husband, maybe that would be a good clip for YouTube. I don't know, it's a thought. So it's very right. And so then that ripples out. The second part of her question is, because she's got this situation here, then that's giving rise to a ripple effect in the experience of feeling frustrated. And I bet you the feeling of frustration causes you to have difficulty knowing where to focus the attention to even get ahead a little bit with any of the 3 projects. It probably dealing with it also makes you tired, because when you feel really frustrated, then it drains, it saps the energy out. So then you've got all 3 projects that require completely consuming. You can't do any of them because all you can do right now is rest, because you feel awful. And so like, I totally get it. Like that's, this, it could be, can you do a healing to let go so a new balance can occur? That's her question. A new seed, a new seed. Any of these 3 projects are part of your story to become re-empowered as divinity embodied. So it could be that this particular situation that seems to be pulling you in 3 directions at once is really here to because each of these 3 projects is going to let you learn the lesson in a particular way, but involved. They're all involved. Whereas the expansion of consciousness that's taking place for this being right now is so great that the whole thing, the whole system could dissolve so that you could do one project, maybe a different project even than those 3, that would be like a concentrated and would give you the value of all 3 projects, the power that you would gain, the sense of self-recognition and appreciation of what you can accomplish as a human. It could give you what you would gain from all 3 of those projects into one project. So that is very abstract, right? I'm not telling you what the project is, but it has a feel. It has a feeling that would accomplish the goals of the other 3 projects in one project that would be faster and more efficient and more life-supporting, because the intelligence, now you know that you can integrate the experience in sleep. You probably already knew that, but being able to more quickly integrate, which is why we're doing some healing for integration today. If we can integrate the lesson more quickly, that means instead of having to do 3 big projects, we can just do 1 small project and accomplish the same thing, right? Because the lesson integrates quickly. So right there, integration is what needs to come in. And it needs to come in at this point of the physiology in this area where those discordant feelings were sitting of the harder I work, the farther I get behind, or it's a double bind, or it's impossible. Right there. So that's what's clearing. That's what's dissolving. Not going to be able, those old beliefs can't stand the test of time. They can't stand the fire of the absolute. They fry up in the fire of the absolute. And out of that comes the seed of efficient integration. The seed of having that larger vision for yourself, that you know what you can accomplish. And opening when the seed starts, it's like all the systems get set back to 0. All the little cycles go set back to 0. So we get a coherent situation that allows a kind of a synchrony with the rest of creation so that the environment can bring the specific action that you need to take in order to accomplish the goal of those 3 projects efficiently. And I'm just watching it integrate and settle in. And may it integrate and settle in for all of us. All of the big projects and all the big steps that we have to take next and next. May we all be able, my dear aunt, may we all be able to take those steps quickly and efficiently with grace and wholeness, and integrate the lesson very efficiently so that the lesson moves into the astral level of the physiology and it supports a healthy belief system all the way around. It clicks in with the beliefs that we already hold that are allowing for our maximum evolution. And then it bolsters and enhances that, nourishes it. Thank you for the wonderful question. I hope that helps. We'll have to stay in touch. Let me know what happens, or if anything else, if there's anything else I can do to support. Thank you. I appreciate all of you so much. And I can't believe our time is already just like flown by. We're already 10 minutes over our, 5 minutes over our time. So I guess it's time to stop. But I just want to thank everyone again for being with me. It was a very interesting exploration. Oh, yeah, you're still here. I've got a raised hand in Utah. Yeah, thank you for being with me. I'm really glad we got a chance to, oh, bless you, God. And lots of sweet little thank yous coming in over in my chat boxes too. So you guys are awesome. And we'll do it again. We have yet, you know, we're just scratching the surface when it comes to manifestation. And like I said, I really love you, and I really love and depend on all of you to discover what you can discover in the archives of the templates and the archives of the blueprints and the places where structuring occurs, because it's a big area, and we just we need each other to do it together. Then we get the big picture. So thank you. We're making a big picture. I love you all dearly. See you again soon. Good night to everyone in Europe. Sweet dreams.